It's delightful to have you be here for this Friday morning. I'm the director of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute here at UC Berkeley. I see familiar faces, but I also see some brand new faces. So we're delighted to have you. For those of you who are here with us for the first time, OLLI at Berkeley is a program for people over 50 who want to continue to learn about all the issues that are in front of us, some historical retelling behind us, but all important around bringing us together and working with campus to have a public platform for the exchange of new ideas. So we offer courses and events like this, and we were very delighted when Dariush Zahedi, who is a former OLLI faculty person, I think teaching in 2009, asked us if we would be willing to host this very important presentation. So what I'd like to do is hand the microphone over to Dariush, and he will make the introduction. But I wanted to be at least here to welcome you all and our speaker.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Susan. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. It is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Raed Sharafuddin. Throughout his long and illustrious career, spanning some 35 years, Mr. Sharafuddin has served as a central banker, as the first governor of Banque de Liban, or the Lebanese Central Bank, from 2009 to 2019, as an academic, teaching at the American University of Beirut, the Lebanese American University, University of Balamand, and the Hariri Canadian University. He has been an international banker, serving as the alternate governor for Lebanon at the International Monetary Fund and the Arab Monetary Fund from 2009 to 2019. He has been a business executive, and he has and continues to be a social and economic reformer. He's a board member and a senior advisor to several non-governmental organizations that focus on alleviating poverty, improving education, healthcare, social justice, and female empowerment. Today, he's going to trace the trajectory of governance in the Arab world and analyze governance in the Arab world across 4 dimensions: historical, governmental, economic, and socio-cultural. He's going to tell us why the trend has been towards a downward trajectory for governance and what can be done to reverse it. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sharafuddin.
Thank you, Dariush, for the introduction. I'm not a doctor. I'm not smart enough to be one. And thank you, Susan, for hosting me here. The state and governance for civilization are like the form for matter, and it's the form that preserves its existence. It has been established in the sciences of wisdom that it's not possible to separate one from the other, that is to say, form from matter. So the state without civilization is inconceivable, and civilization without the state and governance is unfeasible. due to what taints human nature of aggression that calls for restraint. Those were the words of the great Arab historian and sociologist Ibn Khaldun around 7 centuries ago, 1300s AD, late 1300s AD, in setting the solid relationship between governance and civilization. What distinguishes Ibn Khaldun in his vision that comprehensively encompassed political, economic, and sociocultural implications in this relationship, thus envisioning the zenith of the golden age of Arab governance. Governance in the Arab world is a topic that encompasses rich and diversified contexts from the historical, governmental, economic, and sociocultural perspectives in a critical region geopolitically, where the geopolitical setting and very characterized by dynamic uncertainties. In my talk today, I will shed light on the realities, challenges, and opportunities of the Arab governance across 4 different understandings, as Dr. Zahedi has talked about. We'll talk about the concept in the concept of governance from 4 different perspectives: the historical, governmental, economic, and sociocultural. And we'll conclude with a holistic view that attributes the limitations of Arab governance to the prevailing triad of rentier state, factional trend, and corruption. A counter perspective and the capitalization on the region's enormous potential on the economic and cultural heritage levels present a possible path for a crucial governance renaissance in the Arab world. The status of the Arab governance has passed through successive phases of progression and regression, prompted by external and internal factors through various periods of medieval and modern history. I will highlight 2 historical landmarks that reflect opposing governance realities in ancient and modern Arab eras: the ancient Golden Age Arab era, Andalusia, and the modern post-colonial era. The strategic location of the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA region, with the Arab countries at the heart, connecting 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe, with the major commercial networks, or sometimes we call it the curse of geopolitics. But it led this region to the world's leading economic power from the 7th to the 12th centuries. In the 11th century, per capita GDP in the MENA region was higher than those in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Western Europe. This medieval era, known as the Golden Age of the Arab Islamic Empire, coincided with the European Dark Ages, which was between 500 and 1000 AD. That preceded the period of the European Renaissance. The great developments recorded in this era were accomplished by the Abbasid dynasty, which were based in Baghdad, the Fatimid dynasty, which were based in Cairo, and the Andalusian dynasties. And we'll talk about dynasties. There was the Umayyad first, and then the Abbasids last, based in Spain. Such development were focused in the domains of culture and education through many significant innovations in art, mathematics, technology, literature, and architecture, bringing unprecedented wealth and prosperity to a large percentage of the MENA population. Islamic values stressed promoting good governance and peaceful coexistence. We have many such texts in the Islamic tradition. I'll give some examples here. The Andalusian Arab governance demonstrated an interlinking transcultural Islamic Christian Judo ecosystem that presented a unique historical phenomena of a collective synergy, free of tension, antagonism, known by academics as convivencia or convivencia. There are this is not very, it's not very known fact. There are 7 covenants that Prophet Muhammad, we're talking about governance and conviviality and democracy. Prophet Muhammad had 7 covenants and proven. 3 to the Christians, monks of St. Catherine Monastery in Sinai, Christians of Najran, Christian Armenians in Jerusalem, 2 to the Jews of Khaybar and Maqna, and children of Israel in the possession of the Jews in Yemen. And this is verbatim. This is how it's quoted. This is so how it is. And for the Sumerian and the Zarathustrian priests, the Magis, the big ones. And there are 2 other governance-related documents as well. One is Umar ibn Khattab's document, the second Khalifa, and for the Christians of Jerusalem, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, the 4th Khalifa, to Malik al-Ashtar. Malik al-Ashtar was his governor in Egypt. And what's interesting about this document is that it really tells him how to treat his citizens and how to develop an economy and how to develop the society. In addition to those, there's the Covenant of Medina, the Pact of Medina, a Constitution of Medina, Dustur al-Medina, or the Charter of Medina, where Prophet Muhammad has reached out to the others being Christians, Jews, pagans, and even within the Muslims, those who migrated with them. You have al-Muhajirin migrated from Mecca to Medina with Al-Ansar. So this was a beautiful document talking about principles of justice, civic equality, freedom of religious and racial tolerance, piety, etc. Moving on to modern times. The downturns of socioeconomic and political systems of Arab countries have been significantly triggered by imperial and colonial forces. The impact of is explicitly described in Nicholas Dirk's book, Colonialism and Culture. Is rather intriguing quotation. The post-colonial world is one in which we may live after colonialism, but never without it. And this applies so much to our part of the world. In this context, colonialism attributed or contributed to serious consequences concerning indigenous cultures and identities of the Arab region. In the post-colonial era, governance in the Arab region has been challenged by external and internal factors. As for the external factors, conflicting global and regional powers generated wider economic, social, and political problems that worsened the deteriorating socioeconomic conditions of the Arab region. In the 1950s and 1960s, most Arab countries were loaded with the burdens of decolonialization, national independence, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. However, independence brought about new political elites. Well, personally, I call them herds. Seeking to secure legitimacy and achieve political stability. Just over the past 2 decades alone, look what happened in our part of the world. We started out with the invasion of Iraq in 2003, off to the Israeli war in July of 2006, then on to the foreign intrusion in Libya in 2011, the destabilization in Syria in 2011, the war in Yemen, and Sudan is yet another thing. What happened initially between Sudan and Darfur and what's happening now. And definitely there are lots of statistics talking about the costs and the billions and the hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of costs, in terms of lives that were lost, etc. Prominent internal factors affecting governance in the Arab world can be reflected in the waves of protests and uprisings that had political and socioeconomic backgrounds known as the Arab Spring. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the spring yet, so to be politically correct, I'm calling it Arab countries in transition. My first paper on this subject was in 2011 at Harvard. It was on the financial and economic implications of the Arab awakening. I was so gullible at that time. So I changed it into, so Arab countries in transition is rather politically correct word. It really talks about transition. So to which direction, whether Arab Spring, Arab Autumn, we never know. The stage of this modernization was echoed in 6 Arab Spring states. Started with the Bouazizi in Tunisia, then Egypt, Yemen, Syria, Libya, and Bahrain. In addition to its outcome in 3 other embroiled, I call them embroiled Arab countries, and they're namely Lebanon, Iraq, and Sudan, that have been directly affected by regional detriments. We'll move on to the first topic, is the governmental conception of the Arab governance. So as you remember, there are 4. This is the very first one. We read it already, what Winston Churchill says, recounting Winston Churchill's astute advice on the essential quality of government, a good government leader. What he says, politics is the ability to foretell what's going to happen tomorrow, next week and next month and next year, and to have the ability to afterwards to explain why it didn't happen. So I'm using the VUCA here, the acronym VUCA, which was introduced in the Army War College in 1987 to describe 4 elements, which are volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity of the general situation that prevailed after the end of the Cold War. The 3 decades that followed the end of the Cold War were loaded with VUCA conditions, including the occurrence of successful financial crises, the development of the 4th Industrial Revolution and its manifestations, the rise of security threats represented by terrorism, cybersecurity, cybercrime, direct and proxy wars, and the rise of climate change and trade war costs. Hence, national governments and world leaders must cope with growing volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity in their general governance environment. So where do we stand in the Arab world? It's rather ironic. In the scenario planning, which was, this is what VUCA is all about, is about scenario planning. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, what can be done. So the scenario planning methodology, which was developed by the oil giant Shell to avoid the impact of the oil shock caused by the Arab oil embargo imposed during the 1973 Arab-Israeli war. The irony lies here is that in the fact that this foresight methodology was inspired by the Arab strategic measure, but it was never to be utilized by the Arab political establishment. Instead, it was adopted by others. Observations of socioeconomic, The Arab Spring is considered a landmark in modern Arab history, as the governance aspirations and grievances of the Arab population founded prerequisites for the outbreak of Arab Spring. The setbacks of this mobilization harmed the general Arab governance scene. Observations of, I'll get closer to talk about some indices and indicators, so rather than only having a narrative to drive the point home. Observations of socioeconomic indices indicate that most Arab Spring and embroiled countries, so the 6+3, witnessed a decline between the periods before and after Arab Spring mobilization in the following indices: corruption perception, global competitiveness, ease of doing business, human development, global innovation, open budget, e-government development, and human freedom. Well, it is noted that in this old indices, most indicators are below global averages and middle rankings, which indicate relative vulnerabilities throughout all indices, well, except GCC countries, the Gulf Cooperation countries, including Bahrain, which was one of the Arab countries, Arab Spring countries. That is an exception. On to some more, well, I'll get to the numbers in a second. I will specifically approach Arab governance from the governmental perspective by highlighting three groups of indices. One is the representation, participation, and freedom. Specifically, we'll talk about both and accountability, regulatory quality, rule of law, and human freedom index. Two, government effectiveness, specifically the government effectiveness index, the open budget index, and the e-government development index. And three, control of corruption, namely corruption perceptions index, CPI. I will briefly present the findings of the Arab Governance Index project introduced recently by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for West Asia, ESQA. Okay. Here's the voice and accountability of all the countries we have talked about. If you look at them, they are down below. The numbers are down below, unfortunately, except for Tunisia, which is recorded slightly more than half. The regulatory quality of Arab governance, more than half the Arab states recorded less than half of the percentile rank in the regulatory quality index. The rule of law, same thing. They recorded less than half of the percentile rank for more than half of Arab states in 2021. And by the way, if we're looking at the numbers, those are the most recent numbers that we're able to gather. So there are numbers of 2023, numbers in 2021. So this is why sometimes you see some disparities, but here have been consistent in looking at 2021 for all those measures here. Human freedom indicator, the same thing. This, by the way, it covers 165 jurisdictions and in the following areas: rule of law, security and safety, movement, religion, association, assembly, and civil society, expression and information, relationships, size of government, legal system and property rights, sound money freedom to trade internationally, and regulation. So in this, the record of Arab countries indicate that all their rankings fall in the last third of the Human Freedom Index world ranking, except for Jordan, which is interesting. Government Effectiveness Index. And so as you will see, let me just get on to the other part. So the same thing. Unfortunately, they all rank in the bottom. And here, the government conception of Arab governance and the open budget index here, it's rather interesting. The same thing with the control of corruption, e-government development, and I like this quote here about the corruption by the Nobel Prize laureate Suu Kyi, or Kyi, what I don't know how to pronounce it. It's not power that corrupts, but fear. Fear of losing power corrupts those who wield it, and fear of scourge of powers corrupts those who are subject to it. And sometimes the question is why things are not moving in the right direction. Why, when you look at the Arab world from bottom up, it didn't work, the Arab Spring. Top to bottom, it's working somehow, but are we, for example, with Saudi Arabia, but are we getting across in all these dimensions? Definitely there's lots of societal change, same thing with the Emirates. But where are we getting? So lots of indicators. So prosperity is one, but you have the freedoms, you have freedom of expressions, etc., etc. The France in its fifth republic is not there by accident, not there by chance. So things move, but hopefully our things will move in the right direction. I need to get on to the last bit here, this one, the Arab Governance Index by the United Nations Project of the Arab Governance. It highlights the divergence between corruption control, which is CPI, the Corruption Perception Index, and the Human Development Notion, represented by the Human Development Index. So on one side, on the one hand, and the three pillars of good governance, namely rule of law, ease of access to justice, and institutional accountability and effectiveness, that's the second one, and participation, the third one. What it finds here that some Arab countries have relatively good HDI ratings, which is Human Development Index, and control corruption, perform that is poorly on the level of good governance pillars of the Arab Governance Index. Jordan ranks well on this, by the way, and GCC countries rank well in this as well. Okay, on to the second one. The economic conception of the Arab governance we'll talk about here, the underdevelopment paradox. Viewed through the lens of economic development, the Arab region appears to be a place of paradox. It is home to the world's wealthiest societies, powered by oil and gas rents. So oil and gas rents. So we're talking about rentier economy. That's the thing we'll be talking about in a second as well. Amid its poorest populations, it is stalled in conflict, corruption, and underdevelopment. The Arab socioeconomic settings in particular has been subject to various conflicts, economic downturns, and concurrent crises, witnessing unprecedented migration and displacement waves, leading them to struggle with key policy pressures. Look at those numbers. The outcome is that 32 million Arabs out of the 465 million were living outside their home countries in 2019, which account for about 12% of the total international migration stock, half of whom remained within the region. In Lebanon, we are a population of about 5 million people. We have 1.5 million Syrians, in addition to 300,000 Palestinians, in addition to some Yemenis, in addition to Iraqis and Egyptians. We're not talking about helpers, home helpers. We're talking about people who have really migrated out of their own countries. Lebanon is the largest country, is the per capita, it has the most number of refugees in the world, more so than Jordan, which has a Syrian presence, and Turkey, which has Syrian presence as well. Moreover, by mid-2020, almost 55% of the world refugees originated from the Arab world, for the Arab region. And the Arab region has become the host of 41.4 million migrants and refugees. In Lebanon, we call the Syrians migrants. We don't call them refugees. That's a different, for political, economic, all kinds of reasons, we don't call them refugees. While recent monetary policy options appear limited in many Arab countries in light of international and local development, fiscal policy can play an important role. So though the challenges are on monetary policy and on fiscal policy as well, in limiting the contractionary impact of tight monetary policy in countries that have fiscal space. I would like to show this table. I will not read it all, but I'll just give you a summary of that. If you look at the top ones, those indicators on the top, the first one is the Global Competitiveness Index. The second is Doing Business Index, so it's Ease of Doing Business Index. Third is Human Development Index. Fourth is Global Knowledge Index. Fifth is Global Innovation Index. Then Human Capital Index, Global Entrepreneurship Index, the FINDEX, which is the Global Financial Inclusion Index, and Global Misery Index. So it talks about the well-being. I will not go through each one of them. I'll just go to the summary. And in that, the outcomes indicate the comparative deficiencies that most observed Arab countries suffer from, according to those indices, whereby most rankings fall in the lower halves. Moreover, it's evident through these results that there's a deep socioeconomic dichotomy between the Arab oil exporting countries, particularly the GCC ones, and the rest of the Arab countries due to the substantial financial resources obtained by the former countries. A sole exception is the GEI, Global Entrepreneurial Index, which can be explained by the fact that Arab private sector is characterized by remarkable resilience and promising potential on the level of entrepreneurship, despite the devastating socioeconomic shortcomings. And I think this is a strong message of how countries should be built. Smaller government, a larger private sector. On to the third component. Many researchers argue that culture is one of those items that defy a single all-purpose definition. So there's no one size fits all. Being a component that encompasses visible and invisible psycho-sociological and civilizational communal aspects, the cultural conception of Arab governance is a complex perspective that requires deep research and analysis. Here, I've decided to talk about only three of them. The Hofstede model of national culture, the development of democracy, and the concept of civilizational renewal. In Hofstede, he talks about 6 cultural dimensions, that includes all countries, by the way. What I decided to do is bring together those relevant to the Arab world and put them just as follows. Okay, let me go to the conclusion here. So these are the 6 dimensions that Hofstede talked about, and along the 12 Arab countries that he had in his studies. All observed countries recorded a power distance score above 70%, indicating a relatively high equality gap between superiors and subordinates. 2, all observed countries recorded an individualism score below 50%, which indicates low individualism or high collectivism. Thus, people perceived themselves as being part of a wider in-group. 3, on the masculinity level, the scores of observed countries ranged between 40 and 70%, which signifies that social gender roles in most of these societies are not sharply distinct. 4, most of the observed countries recorded a relatively high level of uncertainty avoidance, above 60%, which means that those societies tend to rely very strongly on their set rules in an attempt to control as much of the prevailing high uncertainty as possible. All observed countries scored low on long-term orientation, less than 36%. Such scores denote that these societies emphasize the past for their future decisions, leading them to stick to conventions and maintain a static mindset. Thus, this also signifies less planning and inflexibility towards change. And last, for the indulgence, most observed countries scored less than 41%, which indicates high restraints on the gratification of needs due to strict social norms. Well, though the application of Hofstede's approach to Arab countries has been criticized for its tendency towards generalization and stereotyping, it offers some kind of an indication, a significant overview of the major contemporary traits of Arab culture. The second topic within culture, the cultural conception, is the development of democracy. There's a consensus that participative democracy in the Arab region suffers from grave shortcomings and needs progressive efforts for its development. However, in this context, I would like to focus on one particular aspect of the relationship between democracy and Arab culture. That's to say, development of democracy in the Arab world lacks adequate consideration of the cultural foundation of the Arab political and social life. Hence, certain cultural aspects linked to individual identity, heritage kinships, factionalism, and mobility need to be considered as vital elements of the political ecosystem of these countries. Accordingly, the development of democracy in Arab countries has to embrace elements of constitutional and legal organization that are compliant with Arab cultural orientations rather than approaching democracy or legitimacy or institutions in a cultural vacuum by adopting Western constitutional forms that are insufficient in meeting local needs. Accordingly, it's possible to consider that the following freedoms must be fundamental to Arabs to prevent the major threat of social chaos, with the relative intensity of these propositions varying among regions. One, freedom of movement. Arabs rely heavily on mobility to freely negotiate their networks whenever it's advantageous. Two, freedom of law. For Arabs, this issue is not only related to jurisdiction, but also connected to freedom from the possible chaos that may result from adhering to a legal system that is locally unresponsible and unresponsive. Freedom of the local. Well, here's the tribal value system that emphasizes the importance of creating local networks that occasionally merge to form larger groups, and the idea that a person's identity is greatly influenced by the interpersonal customs of the local community. And last, freedom of personality, where Arab culture places a strong emphasis on having a unique personal identity and right to privacy, and believes that the strength of personality is essential for navigating the outside world. The last bit here is the concept of civilizational renewal. And it's very interesting. I will be quoting Muhammad Abed al-Jabiri, a Moroccan Arab scholar who has written four volumes talking about the critique of Arab reasons between 1980 and the year 2000. And in that, let me go straight to what Abedi talks about. Muhammad Jabir al-Abedi. He's Moroccan. What he says is that he looked at three different things. There are three different things. One, he talks about the three systems of thought in the formation of Arab cognitive reason. One is rhetoric or linguistic analysis. He called it al-bayan. It's in Arabic, rhetoric or linguistic analysis. Two, Gnostic system, al-arfan. And three, demonstrative reasoning, al-burhan. So this is one set that he talked about. There's another set. He talked about three systems of Arab political reason. So one is the tribe or tribalism, al-qabila. Two, spores of war and wealth division, al-ghanima, which is, in sense, it's actually in the modern time, you'd call it rentier state. And third is the creed or dogma, al-aqidah. The third element, he talked about five value systems in the Arab ethical reason: the Persian, Greek, Sufi, Arab, and Islamic. So he looked at all these elements together, and what he concludes is that the structure of Arab cognitive reason is that rhetoric and Gnosticism have demonstrated Arab value system instead of deductive reason and rationalism, which flourished actually, but faded. It flourished at some point in time, but faded soon. As to the political reason, he claims that Arab culture was and continues to be dominated by an economy built of favoritism and nepotism, and a creed that became dogmatic and conservative. Regarding ethical reason, he argues that the system of Persian authoritarian kingship, Greek idealism, and Sufi isolationism neglected the other two most important value system, the Arab value system of magnanimity, al-muru'a, and the Islamic value of public good, al-maslaha al-amma, for social justice. It's rather interesting. Based on the aforementioned, a civilizational renewal that re-inspires the brilliant and valuable aspects of the Arab historical cultural experience on the one hand, and instigates the advanced, effective, and elevating aspects of modern Western civilization on the other hand, can result in a balanced, civilized model. And I will not get on, maybe we'll get on it in the question and answer session. Okay. Last, the limitation of Arab governance. The triad of rentier state, factionalism, and corruption. A modern definition of economic rent explains it as, and I'm quoting here, payment for goods and services beyond the amount needed to orient the required factors of production towards a production process that sustains supply. Applying this definition to the level of national political economy, the rentier state is said to be a subset of a rentier economy, which encompasses a wide range of socioeconomic, political, and cultural features. To be classified as a rentier state, the nature of the state is best examined through the size of the government relative to the economy and the sources and structures of its income. In this context, a rentier state is one that solely concentrates on state institutions and revenues it receives from the different rent sources that it regulates. The rentier economy is characterized by several interrelated aspects. First, only a small minority, the dominant elite, are involved in the generation of wealth, while the majority of people are involved in wealth distribution and consumption. Second, in most cases, rent liberates the government from the need to collect taxes from the domestic economy, and/or it portrays a patrimonial relationship between the state and the wide base of its beneficiary population. Third, labor in rentier economies is distorted by unearned wages and neglects productive efficiency. Fourth, rentier economies are particularly vulnerable to external price shocks due to the reliance on real revenues, like oil price crashes, the Dutch disease phenomenon. And finally, economic development in rentier economies is not measured by high per capita income, but by a transformation of the social forces of production, which suffer from the wide income gaps and technological and organizational development. To end up, in conclusion, the actualization of the Renaissance project of governance in the Arab world needs to be comprehensive, needs a comprehensive vision that encompasses various elements of strategic strategic Renaissance projects, including political, socioeconomic, and cultural perspectives. Moreover, the achievement of such a project, bearing centuries of tardiness and decay, requires solid willpower, diligence, and synergetic efforts from all Arab vital forces who believe in the necessity of reform and renewal as an action of survival and not as an option of luxury. Thank you very much.
We have microphones for anyone who would like to ask a question. Yes.
Following your last comments, do you see any of the Arab countries embarking on the changes that would lead to the, quote, Renaissance?
Oh, okay.
I had a similar question, but related. And what's the forums for these discussions or for this kind of Renaissance to take place? How does that happen, if it happens?
Shall I take more or shall I start answering?
Why don't we start?
Sure, certainly. Any countries embarking on such changes, there are lots of aspirations, but unfortunately, because of this background, what we have talked about, this backdrop. So this is really haunts us. And the recent initiative was in October 2019 in Lebanon, where people flocked in, and it was one of the nicest revolutions ever. It was such a classy revolution, the Lebanese style. They came in, they were well dressed, they flocked into the streets, and they really were talking about very specific issues. But the political herd that we have in Lebanon, we have a very interesting political system. They were able to infiltrate them, and before you know it, they were not, it was like a Babylonian thing, so they cannot hear each other, and there were so many different demands. What's going on here? When they started in the first day on Thursday, October 19, there was something. They really were converging into one single thing, and they were demanding specific demands. They wanted freedoms, they wanted prosperity, etc., representation, and what have you. All of a sudden, before you know it, that convergence became so diverged, and they said, what? And all of a sudden, we started having sort of like blocks of people in different regions and preventing others from getting into the other region. So the political power is rather strong, and they can really take even a revolution, which, I don't know, maybe like 1 million people flocked in at that time. It was such a beautiful thing, but they were able to divert it into a totally different thing, and everybody played in their favor. So this is how strong the establishment is, the deep state, and they are all in this together. So who's for something or against something, when it comes to threats, they all are combined, or they all are gathered in facing that. Similar things apply in other countries. So this is an example of Lebanon. As for the question of, is there any forums taking place in such a thing? Well, no, I can't say that it's a forum that really is going places. There are lots of talks. In Lebanon, we were hoping that the elections of 2022, 2 years ago, May of 2022, would bring in those who will really make changes. And they were like 13 out of 120, so 10%, little over 10%. But they were not able to do anything. And here's Lebanon. I'm giving Lebanon as an example because it is the most vibrant country in terms of freedom, not democracy. So there's a difference. Freedom is you can express, you can say anything. Democracy is whenever you can change or not change anything. You want to express, say anything to anybody, just feel free to do that. You want to demonstrate, be my guest, be there all day and night. However, when it comes to democracy, when it comes to this changing something, it can't happen. So 10% of the current parliament is made up of those change agents, and they call themselves التغييريين. Those are really, they are for the change. But you know what? Out of the 13, there are not 4 that sit together now. So even establishment was able to get into this, the 13 people that came together, and they really can't. And there are lots of initiatives I'm taking on the economic front in Lebanon. Whenever I invite them, because I invite different blocks of parliamentarian blocks. And what's interesting, I couldn't gather more than 3 at the same time. So 3 plus 4 one time plus 2, and that's it. They can't come together at the same time. So this is how difficult it is difficult, unfortunately. So there are lots of ways that we really need to think about it. And personally, after working on this paper, and as a matter of fact, only this morning, said, okay, now what? How to go about it? So I have actually demanded from myself to be pragmatic, practical, and to go about it in a systematic way. Come up with a manifesto that can really do something. While it's not easy to fight them, but we cannot be with them. So what can you do? How can you bring about change that's from the bottom up? Because in Lebanon, unlike the GCC countries, GCC countries, we have MBS in Saudi Arabia. Whenever he has an idea, he just can go out and implement it. Same thing in UAE and other GCC countries. That's a different system. But in other Arab countries, where there's more democracy, more representation, how can you go about change? And where you have a strong establishment, a deep state, so how can you really go about it? So the sequel for myself, looking at this paper, okay, now what I've done is diagnose the situation, looked at our psyche, our sociology, our background, our mindset, what really drives us, what really motivates us, okay? Which is fine. What I did so far, a problem, as Socrates says, a problem identified is a problem half solved. So at least I'm there in this half, and I hope to be. And this is actually one of the things that I would like to take it to a more sort of a policy decision, not leave it at the intellectual arenas. Just move it there, move into what can really be done and test it.
My question is about, I noticed that a lot of the countries that scored well on the various indexes were rentier countries, except Jordan scored very well. And I don't see that as a rentier country. Do you have any perspective on why? Was it the kingdom?
Can I take more questions so that just let's take 2, 3 questions and then I will answer them all at a time.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on the point that the Arab countries have more of a Gnostic understanding of cognitive understanding.
Should I just speak now? Well, I have a question on a little bit of a different angle.
Okay.
I'm a learning specialist, and in the last year and a half, I've been doing volunteer work. I'm retired at an elementary school in Alameda.
Okay.
The largest number of children that I work with are from Afghanistan. They don't have, the school district doesn't have the kind of academic support that these children need. And I am there and able to work with them, first graders. Most of the girls wear the traditional
hijab. The hijab, headscarf.
Correct. And the boys do not. They've got lots of zippy jackets from Costco and they're excited about their shoes. Do you know how, it hasn't been appropriate for me to ask, how did you get here? When did you come? Who else is here? But the children clearly have parents, aunts and uncles, grandparents, some grandparents. Do you have any idea how families have come from Afghanistan, arrived in Alameda? How is there sponsorship? Is this individual initiative? Any idea what is going on in this particular piece here?
Okay. Any more questions before I start answering?
I'm wondering about something that I saw a while ago in the news where people were, a woman, for example, took a gun into the bank to get money for a. Can you explain what was going on there?
Do you want to make that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Okay,
And then one more question.
please.
Okay. Sorry, one more question. I'm curious about. I need to operate the mic. I'm curious to know about the role of social media in galvanizing or segmenting different groups, particularly those, you spoke of in 22 and 19.
Okay. First question was about the rentier economies and Jordan ranking well. Yes, Jordan has an interesting human resources, and I think Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine compete in one thing, which is the knowledge economy. We really do compete with the Palestinians and with the Jordanians in the knowledge economy, in their understanding. We rank better, but generally those three societies are vibrant societies in terms of the knowledge economy, in terms of their intellect, and being geared towards the new economy, being geared towards the information technology, startups, and what have you. And all these countries have their own sort of ecosystems that help out. But still, that doesn't mean that there isn't no rentier economy. However, there's that dimension which helps out for them to get out of the rentier economy as such, just like the rest of the Arab countries. As the Gnostic system that Muhammad Abd al-Jabiri talks about, he really talks about it that it's in terms of the learning, in terms of the dealing with it, in terms of viewing things. So it's an intellectual thing in how Arabs view themselves. I didn't do the research. I was quoting him, and what he was saying vis-a-vis the other elements, vis-a-vis other countries. How the Afghans got here, I don't know. This is beyond my pay grade. I can tell you how Arabs got here, maybe I can, but how Afghans get here and when did they get here, I can't tell. Was it after the pullout of Afghanistan of the American forces? Were they sponsored by? I have no idea. I can't answer to that. Now, gun in the bank. Actually, it's more than there are more than a gun in the bank. Sometimes there are people getting in with cocktail Molotov or something. So getting in. That will get me on to another tangent, but let me give you a brief. Maybe we had some of those questions when we talked about it that were of interest to you. In 2000, subsequent to the revolution, whatever, subsequent to the moves of the population in 2019 in October 17, 2019. For some reason, that's not quite clear yet. Banks have decided to close down for 2 weeks. And from Friday October 18th until Monday, November 1st. And can you imagine people being away from the banks and they have no access? So what can really happen is only natural. People will just flock into the banks and to draw some or all of their money because they were fearful, apprehensive of that occurrence happening again. But all banks, including the largest of banks in the United States or anywhere else, and we vividly remember what happened to Silicon Valley Bank only a year ago. No bank has enough cash, enough stock of money that can avail all its customers at once. And this is only natural. Let's call it mismatching of assets and liabilities. So your deposits are the bank's liabilities, and your loans are bank's assets. Your deposits can be in for a month or 3 or 6 or 12, but generally in deposits. But generally, the asset side, which are the loans, can be in for 30 years in terms of housing loans, car loans for 5 years, personal loans for 2 years, education loans for 4 years. So there's always a mismatching of assets and liabilities all over the world. And this is banking system, plain vanilla, taking deposits and giving out loans. So when people came in flux on November 1st onwards, they wanted to draw all their money. Sometimes some people have lots of money, and they want to withdraw that as well in the millions of dollars, and banks couldn't do it. Not only that, to add insult to injury, within those 2 weeks between Friday and Monday, Friday the 19th and Monday the 1st, banks actually were operating in their head offices, and they were transferring monies to these, talking about the deep state and the elements of the deep state. Those people literally in the hundreds of millions of dollars, literally. And this is not actually it's proven literally. $500 million for someone, $1 billion for another one, hundreds of other $1 million to others and others. So this became a problem to the banks of how to respond to others. So all of a sudden, they don't have that liquidity. They had some liquidity, and they still do, but they didn't have enough liquidity. And unfortunately, what happened is that when this money was transferred, there was little left for someone who had to send $10,000 for tuitions and fees, or for education of their kids, or even I had to interfere myself. I was out of the central bank at that time, fortunately. With some banks, it's for education. Some people were here in the United States. Some people had medical expenses. So I had to interfere myself, using that previous clout of mine as a vice governor of the bank, just our friends, helping out in just transferring just tens of thousands of dollars. We're not talking about hundreds, only tens of thousands of dollars to meet basic needs of health, education, rent, and what have you. So this lady, and actually, by the way, this lady that you saw that actually stood on the table, she's in one of those members of the parliaments. She was that specific lady. She is an MP, and she is not anyone else. She's an MP, one of those change agents, quote unquote, with a question mark and exclamation mark and it's all kind of funny emojis and what have you. So she is one of them. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have the right to really call for her money. There are really miseries that we have seen, that people do not have access to their money. I don't want to open up that Pandora's box, but there's lots of that they have just, I don't know why not more people do it, by the way. I have no idea why not more people do it. This and others and others and others, that they are entitled to their money, irrespective of whether they need it for education, for health reasons, for sustenance, whatever. So this is unusual, even though, are we that tamed? One of the things that plays well in our favor is the the Lebanese diaspora. The Lebanese diaspora has been really good to Lebanon all along. Lebanese started migrating the world over since the 1800s. As a matter of fact, there were tens of Lebanese on board the Titanic back in April 1912. And before the Titanic, so there are people, the immigration started to the United States in the late 1800s. In 1927, Professor Philip Hetti, a Lebanese-American historian, in his book, Syrians in America, and at that time, Syrians meant Lebanon and Syria. So it was the Grand Syria, Greater Syria. He talks specifically, he actually quotes hearings in the Congress about how Lebanese were the first people to send in money per capita to their country, even at 1924. So he talked about that then. So all along, Lebanese have been there next to their parents, next to their friends and relatives and compatriots and what have you. We have that compassion. And this is what kept Lebanon so far. Thinking about how the livelihoods of people just vanished literally. You know, someone who is retired has their money in the bank and not doing any other thing, drawing interest on their income and the interest income from the deposits, and others. How can they really do with what's happening, and where the Lebanese lira lost 95% of its value? When we left the central bank early 2019, the dollar was 1,500. Now it is 90,000 lira. So, and you know, just this is one. So this is the value of money. And what about inflation in the hundreds of percent? So not only you have inflation here, but that is something else over there. So there are lots of other challenges that are met through collaboration, through support, through that's a really nice dimension that's not mentioned in my paper here because it's not it doesn't have its place here, but that camaraderie is there. People stepping in is there, helping out. It's no problem. Even when they have less, they are really willing to share. So they have demonstrated lots of positive elements, and you know, it is those times that you see and you feel and you, the real material of people when you really, what do you call it, when you really look at it and test it. One more question here about the social media. Well, the social media, as in everywhere, it has been generally, in relation to what has happened in Lebanon, has been good in a sense that it really did shed lights on lots of the things that they usually take more time for people to be aware of. Definitely, there are lots of jokes about it, is that historically, if someone had a dumb cousin or a dumb son or a dumb daughter, only they would know about it. Now everybody does. So but still, there's a downside to social media. But when it comes to places like Tunisia, Egypt, and Lebanon, it had worked really well. It galvanized people. It really propagated. It really helped out in understanding and sometimes in directing them somewhere or another. But it has a very powerful impact. This is why, for example, in countries like Iran, they just cut it off. So they know the power of the social media. They cut it off. In Lebanon, they didn't. They didn't, because even within Lebanon, we have people for and people against. I don't remember who was the Minister of Telecom at that time, who was with or against. So this is how it goes. But generally, the social media was really good, very helpful, very effective. Of course, this is why I said they cut it down, and even basic WhatsApps are really a challenge to not only Facebook and Twitter and others, even basic communication. Sure, absolutely. With Mahasti, with the Mahasti. Yeah.
Dariush, do you want to come to the front? Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Riot, for your very illuminating presentation. I want to go to your next book or your next article that you mentioned, which
Yes.
will be policy-oriented, and you will come up with the recommendations as to what needs to be done in
Yes.
order to overcome the problems and challenges that you so eloquently enumerated.
Thank you.
With regard to governance indicators. For instance, you talked about colonialism, continuous foreign intervention. You talked about cultural attitudes and mindsets. You talked about corrupt, incompetent, money-grabbing, power-hungry elite who dominate and are well entrenched and difficult to eradicate, as was demonstrated in Lebanon and in Iran and elsewhere. So first of all, and of course, rentier economies and the ravages of the rentier economy. So first of all, which one of these factors would you say, if you were to rank them, would you cite as being more or less important? And then going back to your next book, how would you go about addressing these monumental hurdles?
There would be several. Thank you for the question, which is to start with. Thank you for your comments about my paper, my presentation. I know how to go about it. I don't know yet where I'm getting. There are, as you saw, there are the 4 different elements that in your introduction have kindly mentioned. I will be looking at each one of those elements, each one of those indicators, and look at what can be done. And there are things that can be done relatively easier, things that need others, just like some of those indicators. Some of those indicators need, for example, the government to intervene. Some of them have the Congress, our Congress, or the Parliament, or the parliaments of those Arab countries to intervene. Some, it only needs a willpower. So we'll break it down in those terms. Okay, so the same thing with that I tried to do when I was a first vice governor of the central bank. At some point in time, it was really, really amazing. Initially, when I got in 2009, early 2009, I used to go home and tell my wife, Lena, this is too good to be true. I said, say what? I said, this is too rosy of a picture. In 2009 and 2010, after your global financial crisis, we had the best times. In one single year, in 2009, 24% was the deposits. They increased by 24%. Never before, never after. Actually, we had deposits coming in from the United States, from Switzerland, from other countries that usually go to. So still there, even despite this fact, and our economy was growing at talking about the diaspora, we had $8.7 billion, almost $9 billion of remittances. And at that time, of an economy of $40 billion. So that is a major portion of that. That is the largest per capita in any of the countries. There are lots of diasporas in India, in Egypt, but the per capita in Lebanon was the highest by far. Okay, so I used to sit with the colleagues and said, okay, what else can we do? I was gullible as well at that time. So what else? How can we make it push it even further? And what I did, I looked at indicators, not those indicators. There are other economic indicators. Part of them were here, corruption, doing business index and others, and several other indicators. So what is it that we can do? To start with, charity starts at home. as a central banker, what is it that I can control? So there are two levels. One is the area of influence and the area of concern. The area of the area of influence is usually smaller than the area of concern. I'm very concerned about so many things, climate change, but I can do nothing about it. But the area of control, there are some areas, some indicators that me as a central banker can influence. So let's start here. So this is what I did. I looked at those elements. Let's optimize. Let's make the best out of it, what we can do here from our side. And then look at other elements, other indicators. So who is concerned with this? Doing business, doing ease of doing business. Who is the concerned party here? Simplification of processes, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it's the government and the parliament. So, and so on. So this is the way I'm thinking about approaching it this way, looking at what can people do, what governments need to do. So this is the initial ideas that I'm thinking about taking it to the next level and how to go about it and make it a policy rather than keeping it an intellectually stimulating exercise, take it to a next level and to a policy level. And this is what I have in mind.
I just wondered if you could say something about speaking of all these countries as a group,
right?
Given the enormous differences there are between them.
Very valid point. You can't. Even within the same country, you can't talk to them about the within the same country, you have different cultures, let alone in different countries. And there are some Arab countries that actually we don't understand each other when we speak our dialect, the Lebanese versus the Libyan or the Moroccan dialect. Really can't understand them. We have to understand, even speak slower or go to French or go to English. So that is an example of how we are that diversified, how we are that, you cannot, this is one thing fits all, it can't work. Because of this, it makes it tougher. And this is why I'm talking about policy decisions. I'm thinking about very general things, and they can customize it and take it to their specificities of each of their cultures and each of their countries. There's no one size fits all, certainly within Lebanon, let alone other places. In Lebanon, we have extremes in terms of mindsets. And sometimes when you watch some TVs, okay, you switch on channel 1, whatever that channel is, and go to channel 2. I said, are we talking about the same culture? Are we within the same country? It's hard to believe. It really is hard to believe that we are coexisting together with such diverse and contradictory mindsets, goals, aspirations, and what have you. Lebanon is an extreme case, by the way. We don't have that in other countries. Maybe Syria now, after what happened since 2011 in Syria. But other countries don't have that extremism or polarization in terms of culture understanding, roles, aspirations. We even have a problem with looking at history. We can't agree on very specific incidents in history. The issue will be that I'm talking about will be general. So diagnosis and general prognosis or general ideas that can be applied all over, not very specific thing that you can take it and be having flexibility within that.
I was very struck by the data that you put up about the migrants slash refugees,
Right.
both the people who are living outside their home country and the 50% almost of migrants who are within other Arab countries. And I wonder how much you think that's going to influence political change if you have so many migrants in Jordan and Lebanon and other countries. It not just increases the diversity, it increases the political complexity.
Okay. Are we recording? Okay. I cannot answer freely what I wanted to say. I'll be I could have been much more direct and upfront about what I can say, but since I'm recorded, I cannot. I'll tell it to you later or when there's no recording. The situation of Syrian migrants in Lebanon is rather particular versus those residing in Jordan and in Turkey. And those are the three host countries in the region where there are some Syrians in the United States, and there's hundreds of thousands in Europe, specifically in Germany. But Lebanon has a specific challenge of we are living in a politically unstable region, and migrants can be used easily one way or another. They can be used to fight on one side or another. They can be used to really execute some ISIS-related or ISIS agenda items, because some of them are on that part of, they have that kind of mindset. So the issue is not only the cost, the fiscal costs. It's not only the cost, the burden on our infrastructure. They use exactly the same streets, the same grid, the same electricity grid, the same hospital beds, the same hospital x-rays and what have you. And so exact same resources. And unfortunately, the international community has not responded to those challenges, despite lots of their promises. There were Deauville, there were all kinds of conventions and all kinds of conferences that promised with support, but they didn't come through. On that subject, there's I'm not promoting my website, but I have a paper. It's a rather large paper on the economic and social challenges of the Syrian crisis in Lebanon, under my name, raedsharifuddin.net. And this paper was updated 4 times. In 2016, part of that paper was used in the United Nations General Assembly documents. And so it is a big challenge. But at the same time, just come to think of it, so why us keeping them with the challenges that we have, and why not taking them here or to Canada? We have larger, bigger countries, more affluent countries, or to Europe or other countries. I really don't understand. Are they there to serve a certain agenda? I don't know. They are even being pushed by the regime today to just migrate on and on. And what's interesting, I changed my mind. There's a piece of information that was very relevant, but I will not say it because we're on tape. So yes, we still have, despite all the challenges we have, there are still people still are migrating, and they have been granted facilities to leave the country, although they shouldn't in Syria. It is very challenging from all kinds of you know, if you look at it, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but 50+%, 55% of the inmates in prisons are Syrians. You know, there are lots of statistics that we have been witnessing things that we haven't seen in Lebanon before. Infringements on the law and all kinds of things that we haven't seen. It's un-Lebanese. I'm not saying that Lebanese is something different, but it's, you know, whatever it is, this is what's happening is un-Lebanese in terms of rape, in terms of killing. And we have never seen it in our 7,000 year history. There are things that we haven't seen before. I'm not only attributing it to Syrians, but, you know, there's a correlation sometimes. I'm trying not to say much, but I haven't been able to say that. I don't want to come across as discriminatory, definitely not. I don't want to come across at all with these people are suffering from all kinds of things, from the injustices of their countries, injustices of the global forces, injustices of the international community, and sometimes, unfortunately, people cannot take injustices like others. Some people just are, you know, revolt against that in different ways, and they are as victims. I don't think people would love to be that killers or rapists or stealers or what have you, robbers or what have you. Sometimes they fall into as victims as well of their own conditions.
Thank you. I believe it's time to close, but is there any final comment that you would like to make, or Dariush you'd like to make?
I would like to thank you very much. I'm really privileged to be here and this audience I don't see many 50s and above here that you said. So
that's right.
thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
I'm one of the thank you. Thank you.
And thank you. I think this has been extraordinary for us to hear you. I think we will check out your website and your writings. And I think I speak for many of us. It's rare that we get to hear a philosophizing banker. So thank you.
Thank you.